Gun Owners of America's case against New York's anti-carry law, Antoniuk v. Hochul, is lighting the anti-gunners' hair on fire, and New York pro-gunners are taking notice and circling the wagons. I'm Phil, and this is the Minuteman Moment. First, we filed a lawsuit against New York's new Bruin-compliant law, which tried to make it harder for New Yorkers to exercise their Second Amendment rights by putting everything behind arbitrary requirements like good moral character, or in places that are considered sensitive in New York. If you want more detail, check out the video that we did on this. Thankfully for us, Judge Sotheby granted a temporary restraining order against New York that would have prevented the enforcement of the CCIA. But the anti-gunners couldn't leave good enough alone from their perspective. New York's Attorney General immediately tried to undo all the good we did. Now, the case is up for review in the Second Circuit, awaiting a review by the 3-judge panel. But don't worry, because GOA and our legal team is going to be fighting back against the Big Apple's tyranny everywhere. Each win we get in New York is an L for the anti-gun tyrants in New Jersey, California, or anywhere else that tries to ignore SCOTUS's ruling in Bruin that the right to self-defense shall not be infringed. And as a guy who lives in DC, I'm glad we're doing this. But we're not only fighting on the legal front, so 2 Republican congressmen introduced a congressional resolution that condemns the New York law as unconstitutional and should be struck down immediately by the courts. I'm going to read through a few of my favorite parts of this resolution. Here we go. Whereas a judge for the United States District Court for the Northern District of New York ruled that the key provisions of the law are unconstitutional. Whereas plaintiffs found that to feign compliance with the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association v. Bruin ruling, New York State used laws that demonstrate an individuously discriminatory animus towards religion, national origin, and race, including slave codes and historical analogs. Whereas Judge Glenn Sotheby also granted a temporary restraining order in the subsequent case, Antoniuk v. Hochul, to protect New Yorkers from a wide swath of the state's unconstitutionally enacted Second Amendment infringement. And so all you need to know is that these sections go to show just how important our case is, not only in fighting against gun control, but also making sure that New York and the other anti-gun states actually adhere to the Supreme Court's ruling in Bruin. It also goes to show that there are no boundaries that the anti-gunners won't go in order to remove your rights, like using anti-Christian laws to infringe upon your rights that we've talked about before. So here's what GOA's Director of Federal Affairs had to say about that resolution. New York's Attorney General, who is no friend of the Second Amendment, clearly isn't getting the message from the Bruin decision. Americans have a constitutionally guaranteed right to carry arms in self-defense across the state, outside of their homes. While New York is appealing our victory, Mayor Adams has just signed legislation that directly contradicts the Constitution, Supreme Court precedent, and Judge Sotheby's ruling from last week. We thank Representative Tenney for criticizing the anti-gun hysteria of New York politicians. GOA and GOF will keep fighting for our members and Antoniuk v. Hochul until the state admits defeat or is brought into line by the High Court again. That's from Aiden Johnston, GOA's Director of Federal Affairs and a friend of mine. But before any of you get into the comments and tell me that none of this matters because the resolution is never going to pass the Senate and never going to be signed by this anti-gun president, I want you to remember about a video we published a few days ago. We want this resolution to pass the House, but I understand, and GOA understands, that this isn't really likely under the current political makeup. We're interested in winning now for all of you, so that we can reclaim our lost rights. Secondary to that is making members of Congress have a reflexive reaction to oppose these sorts of anti-gun laws. A weak gun bill when we're in the minority will become a weak gun bill when we're in the majority. So what I want in the discussion below is what you guys actually want when pro-gun members of Congress take power. Do you want them debating the passage of weak gun laws or the passage of strong gun laws? I think you know my answer. And that's why a two-pronged offensive strategy against legislation is exactly what we need to fight the wave of attacks as the anti-gunners attempt to regroup after the devastating loss that was brewing. GOA is going after the anti-gunners in the courts and in Congress. And I also want to add that there's a third way we're going after them, and that's in the state legislatures. GOA's got a really robust state program. So don't forget to keep calling your congressman while also staying up to date with all the latest news. You can follow GOA on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn to follow all of our legal cases. That's it for now. I'll see you next time.